For the penultimate session of PLF 2024, we invite on stage Dr. Uday S. Kulkarni, author, historian, Surgeon Commander, Indian Navy retired, in conversation with Nandini Sengupta, journalist and author, Bal Sahitya Academy Puraskar awardee, about his book Raghoba, The Assassination of Narayan Rao Peshwa.
Namaskar. We are very, very fortunate to have with us Uday Kulkarni ji, who has written a riveting book, Raghoba, The Assassination of Narayan Rao Peshwa. I finished this book in 48 hours flat, so it's a complete page turner. Please do read it, it's available here. But I want to start this discussion today with you, Uday ji, asking you about Raghoba. I mean, when we read about Maratha history, we know about Shivaji, know about Shambhaji, thoda bahut, Raja Ram, Chhatrapati Raja Ram, we know about Chhatrapati Shahu, we know about Baji Rao and Peshwa Baji Rao and all. Who was Raghoba and what is this book about?
Actually, Raghoba is a term I've used, a name I've used for him for the first time in this book. In earlier books, I gave him a lot of respect. I called him Raghunath Rao because that is the full name. He's also called Raghunath Rao, he's called Dada Saheb, he's called Raghoba Dada. But here, just a brief Raghoba because of the deeds that are described in this book. Now, Raghoba was the younger son of Bajirao Peshwa. By younger, I mean he was 11 years younger than Nana Sahib. And therefore, when Bajirao died, when Raghoba was just about 5 or 6 years old, Nana Sahib practically became his guardian. And later on...
Udayji, you have to give context to the audience. Which period are we talking about?
Okay, we are talking about the 18th century. And we are based right now in Pune. And that is where Bajirao's son was born. And Bajirao was the Prime Minister or the Peshwa of the Maratha Empire. I think most of you have seen Bajirao Mastani. A lot of things wrong with the movie, but anyway, at least that popularized Bajirao for the rest of the country. Now, Raghunath Rao, being the younger son of Nana Sahib, he was not entitled to be the next Peshwa. It was Raghunath Rao, Nana Sahib's first born, who would be the next Peshwa. And the Battle of Panipat in 1761, which took place, after that, Nana Sahib died and his eldest son was to be the next Peshwa. Unfortunately, in the Battle of Panipat, his eldest son died. And therefore, his younger son, who was that time only 16 years of age, was to become the next Peshwa. And at that time, the senior statesman in the family was Raghunath Rao or Raghoba. And Raghoba had a very checkered history. I mean, about 10 years before that, you find Raghoba leading the Maratha army, capturing Ahmedabad for the first time. From there, he led a 3-year expedition to the north. He captured Delhi. He replaced the Mughal emperor, which was done several times, of course, by the Marathas in the course of the 18th century. And he attacked the Jats at Kumher. So all that expedition, he came back very successfully. In 1757, he went for a second expedition north because Ahmad Shah Abdali, on his 4th invasion of India, had come, massacred Delhi, looted Delhi, and massacres in Mathura also. And Raghunath Rao, along with Holkars and Sindhyas and a big large army, when Abdali went back to Afghanistan, they chased him and they captured Lahore. I mean, this is the only instance where a southernmost power like the Marathas based below the Narmada went all the way to Lahore and captured that city. And in April 1758, it is described that in the Shalimar Bagh of Lahore, rose petals were showered, rose water was showered on Raghunath Rao for having captured that city. And from there, the Marathas went up to Multan. They captured Multan, they captured Attock, they captured Peshawar, and that was the furthest extent of the Maratha Empire. Now, during this time, Raghoba was really considered a very great general, to the extent that the Shah of Iran wrote to him that let us both combine and crush Ahmad Shah Abdali between us. You come from Persia, I will come, and you come from India, I will come from Persia, and we'll crush him. So Raghoba writes a letter, and this is the original letter written by Raghoba on the 4th of May 1758 to his brother, the Peshwa, that but I say that Kandahar and Kabul were parts of the Mughal Empire until the time of Alamgir. Actually, it was until the time of Shah Jahan, but he writes in the letter until the time of Alamgir. And why should we share it with the Shah of Iran? because Shah of Iran had proposed that I will take Kabul and you take Kandahar. So that was the kind of high point of Raghunath Rao's career. And he comes back from there, unfortunately comes back with a debt of 80 lakh rupees. Because the whole North India had been ravaged before that, there were no funds available, they went over budget, they did all these conquests. The Marathas were in Punjab for a total period of 18 to 19 months before Ahmad Shah Abdali came back. And the weak arrangements which were made there, they could not resist the invasion of Ahmad Shah Abdali, and which led eventually to the third battle of Panipat. Now, because of the debts, you find that Raghunath Rao is not sent to the Panipat expedition after that. And instead, his first cousin, Sadashirao Bhau, is sent to the north. And that finally leads to the Battle of Panipat, which was a close fought affair, but where very important Maratha chiefs died, and mainly people from the Peshwa family, from the Scindia family, a lot of them were killed. And suddenly you find that with Nanasaheb Peshwa dying of a consumptive illness, probably tuberculosis in those days, suddenly you find that the mantle of becoming the next prime minister had fallen on a 16-year-old second son of Nanasaheb, who was Madhav Rao. Now Madhav Rao in the beginning, Raghoba kind of lorded over the Peshwa. He was the regent for Madhav Rao, and for the first 2 years. And there was some internal politics of the family. Madhav Rao's mother resented this kind of imposition on her son, and she resisted it, and therefore Madhav Rao kind of fought back against this kind of and in 1763 the battle with Nizam at Rakshas Bhuvan, which is on the southern bank of the Godavari, the battle is won thanks to Madhav Rao's efforts, and then Raghoba takes a back seat and Madhav Rao comes into his own. And in Madhav Rao's 8 years after that, he led 4 invasions into the Carnatic against Hyder Ali. And in the last battle in 1771, you find that Hyder and Tipu were both defeated just north of Srirangapatnam at Melkote, at a place called Moti Talav, which is called Moti Talav and Thonur in the local place. So at that lake they were defeated, and both had to run away from the battlefield dressed as beggars, and they went into the Srirangapatnam fort. Now from there, within a year, you find a 27.5-year-old Madhav Rao acquires the same illness that his father had and dies. So now there were only 2 people who were qualified to take over as the Prime Minister of the Marathas. One was Narayan Rao, who was the third son of Nanasaheb Peshwa, and second was his uncle, Raghunath Rao. And in fact, Raghunath Rao was in prison when Madhav Rao died, and he called him from prison and asked him, please take care of your younger son, please guide him. And he also told his 2 ministers, please take care of this 17-year-old boy who has got no experience in administration. Raghoba always had ambitions of being the Peshwa. And this story is about Raghoba's ambition. As I call it, the back page, the blurb says Raghoba fallen greatness. So he was great at one time for his own doing, as well as the people who supported him. His brother helped him. And in these days, his ambition gradually made him cross a line from which there was no return. And that line actually led to not only his own fall, but it actually began the decline of the Maratha Empire itself. There's a poem in Marathi which is quoted, which was written much later. पण इथुनी सुरू झाला अद्भुत प्रलयाला. Pralaya is the apocalypse. Yes.
So it's interesting because you've sort of given a pen picture of what this book is about, but this story actually starts way back, right? Story starts in the middle of the 17th century. Shivaji Maharaj, his rise, he becomes Chhatrapati, and then he puts in place a system of governance which is very, very different from the one that was in vogue in India at that time, the Mughal system of governance, the Mughal system of taxation. This is a diametrically different version that Shivaji puts in place. I'm going to ask you 2 questions welded into one. The first is, how was it different? And the second is, how did the fact that the top leadership of not only the Chhatrapatis of the Swarajya, but also the Peshwas, die within quick succession, how did that affect the fate of Swarajya?
If you see, if you come to the year 1646, you find practically the entire India was under foreign subjugation. I use the word foreign very carefully because my definition of an alien rule is based on alien jurisprudence, an alien language which is the court language, and a system of promotions by which those with Turco-Persian ancestry were rewarded with higher mansabs. And this has been amply brought out by a professor from Aligarh Muslim University, where he gives all the mansabs right from Akbar to Aurangzeb and who are the people who got the higher mansabs. Now this was a situation where the indigenous
Can
people...
you just give the details that you shared with me, that the Hindus, for instance, would rarely get more than 5,000 mansabdari, but just
Yeah, basically it was a hierarchical situation. I mean, the first topmost mansabdars of 5, 6, 7,000 people were usually of Turco-Persian ancestry. The next were the Muslims who were converted in India, the Rajputs, and then others. So, and out of the 70 to 80% of the mansabs which were there in the Mughal rule were practically for those with Turco-Persian ancestry. So that was the system in all those years. And in the south, actually Bahmani kingdoms, the Bijapur and Golconda kingdoms were actually in rule. But even there was the indigenous people, as I call them, were always second-rate citizens. So that system had prevailed for 3 to 4 centuries, and that was the backdrop against which you find Chhatrapati Shivaji beginning his career in 1646 by making a seal in Sanskrit. His parent seal was in Persian, but he makes a seal in Sanskrit. And he declares that his aim is to have a Swarajya. Now Swarajya means own rule. By the corollary is that at that time they were under a Pararajya or a foreign rule. And the word Swarajya has been of course used in Indian history only twice. Once when Chhatrapati Shivaji used it, and second when Lokmanya Tilak used it, and both times they were under subjugation. Now the changes which Chhatrapati Shivaji brought out when he began developing his own kingdom of the Maratha Empire, first thing is that he abolished slavery from his kingdom. Secondly, he got rid of, there were some differential taxes like land revenue, for example. There was something called Kharaj. Now the Kharaj was a tax levied on Hindus. For 50% of the land revenue had to be paid by the Hindus, while 10% was paid by the Muslims. And that he got rid of, the 50% thing. Secondly, the Jagirdari which was there, the Jagirdars he got rid of, because Jagirdars, the central government did not reach the common people. Jagirdars took care of that. And therefore, the central government, as long as it got its share of taxes, they did not care what the Jagirdars did. And if the land revenue did not reach the central government, if the Jagirdar failed to get the land revenue, they did not stop short of selling the families of the farmers as slaves in the market. So that was a state. So he got into the Jagirdari. There is another system called the Watandari. Watandari is a patrimony. It's a hereditary system by which the villages, the parganas, the sarkars, the subhas are ruled.
Can you make a distinction here between how the Watandari is hereditary, but the Mansabdars were not?
The Mansabdars were Mughal rulers. The Watandari was in the Maharashtra region. Now the Mansabdari of the Mughals was such that at the death of the Mansabdar, his entire property was confiscated, which encouraged ostentatious expenditure. In fact, the historian named Percival Spear has remarked in one of his books that the Mughals preferred a canal to a well and a garden to a canal. And they built these magnificent monuments out of the gross national surplus, which you could look at, the common people could look at but could not subsist on. And he equates them with Marie Antoinette's cake. So that is the way the Mughals disposed of. So he said the Indian economy had a lot of national surplus, a lot of economic activity, but hardly any outcome out of that. So people remained poor, while today we admire the monuments which the Mughals left behind, and in our mind or in our psyche we relate those monuments with the magnificence of that empire. But those monuments were built at the cost of the people who were actually striving to earn money and paying their taxes. The second thing that Chhatrapati Shivaji did was that the octroi, there was a differential rate of octroi. 5% was the octroi charged on Hindus, and 0 to 2.5% was the octroi charged on the Muslims. Even the Europeans were charged 3 to 3.5%. And I am just talking of the taxation policy. I am not yet coming to the religious policy of the Mughals or the Bahmani kingdoms, who broke thousands of temples. And a beginning of reconstruction of the temples was made in Goa, where there is a temple even standing today called Sapta Koteshwar. originally destroyed by the Muslims, built by missionaries, Christians. Again, the second temple was again destroyed, and then when the second time it was destroyed, Shivaji comes forth and he builds this temple of Saptakoteshwar. This was before the Kashi temple was destroyed in 1669. So you find this was become like a harbinger of what was to come next. Here in Tiruvannamalai, there are two temples. When he came on his Dakshin Digvijay, he went up to the Kaveri, and Jinji was his southern capital practically, which served him in good stead later on. So here in Tiruvannamalai, there are two temples which the people told him locally that these were temples you have been converted into mosques. So he destroyed these two temples. One was a Perumal, one was one more temple which I forget. Two temples which he rebuilt here when he was in 1677 or so. So these were the policies, and there was no secular policy. It was basically secular practice. He treated all his subjects in the same manner. However, it was very clear that this was a rule of a Hindu monarch, and therefore what all damage had been done in the past, he tried his best to repair it.
So, so this is the background to what is then happening in the early part of the 1770s, which is when the stage gets set for the assassination that happens and the repercussions that follow. At this point, would you like to play that clip?
An introduction to that clip. Basically, then you find that Aurangzeb comes down to the Deccan, 1682. A 25-year-old long war takes place. The Bijapur and Golconda kingdoms are extinguished. The Maratha king at that time, Chhatrapati Sambhaji, is captured in 1689. The capital Fort Raigad is captured. His son, the young Chhatrapati Shahu, future Chhatrapati Shahu, is captured, and he remains in the Mughal prison for the next 18 years. And in 1707, after Aurangzeb dies, till then the Marathas give him a very stiff fight. In 1689, he probably felt that I've got rid of Bijapur in 1685, got rid of Golconda in 1687, and got rid of the Maratha king in 1689, and I have captured the entire country. Which was not the case, because the fight continued, and they did not need a monarch to fight it. In fact, Chhatrapati Rajaram, who came here in 1690 and was in Jinji for 8 long years. Now, a side story of this is that at that time he was in need of money, and this very place, Pondicherry, was sold by the Marathas first to the Dutch, and when they didn't pay the money, it was sold to the French, and that is why we are today sitting in what was a French colony. So that is, of course, then 1707 you find that to divide the Marathas, Shahu, who is the son of Sambhaji, is released by the Mughals. He returns to the Deccan, and he has stayed 18 years in a Mughal camp. He has no training of how to fight a war, but he gets able people around him, and he re-establishes his kingdom. In 1713, he appoints Balaji Vishwanath as the Peshwa, because his own Peshwa is captured by Kanoji Angre at that time. It's a very long story, I'm not going to go into that. And after Balaji Vishwanath comes, he settles the basic foundation of the Maratha kingdom of the 18th century, laid in those 7 years that is the Peshwa. 12 years after the death of Aurangzeb, 30,000 Maratha troops are in Delhi, and the Emperor Farrukh Siyar is deposed, and the 3 sanads, the 3 orders are obtained from the Mughal Emperor, granting the Marathas Swarajya, which was the original kingdom of Chhatrapati Shivaji, Sardeshmukhi, which was 10% of the revenue collected from the 6.5 subas of the Deccan, which was to be paid to the Maratha king, and the right to collect Chauthai, which was 25% of the revenue of 6.5 subas of the Deccan. And this is kind of these are the orders based on which the Marathas try to enforce their rights in the Deccan for the next 100 years. And when Balaji Vishwanath died in 1720, you find that the next 20 years are the era of Bajirao, you can call him, because from a state which probably covered just 4 districts, you find at the end of Bajirao's reign in 1740, it has spread from the Yamuna to the Tungabhadra in the south. And that is the expansion. From a kingdom, it becomes an empire during this 20 years of Bajirao's reign. Then the period of Nana Sahib comes, and the first again battle happens in this area where the Anglo-Maratha rivalry is taking place. The English and the French, they have a battle. First time you find just 300 French soldiers with rapidly reloading guns defeating an army of 30,000 men who had come from the Nawab of Arcot to put them in their place. And with the victory there, that is the time when Dupleix was the governor of Pondicherry, and he strived hard to create a French empire in India. In fact, for a time, I would say that if there was no Dupleix, there would have been no Clive. Because whether it is the siege of Trichinopoli, whether it is later events why he took over the Nizam's kingdom, all this was, I mean, Dupleix's letters, if you read, he had ambitions of taking over Bengal, and he had ambitions of taking over the Maratha kingdom. So he was not supported by his king. The French king did not imagine what is the potential of the work that Dupleix is doing here. While the English East India Company, being a corporate entity, they realized that what this country could really get for them. And that was the era of Clive, which began after that. So this rivalry began in this region. And Nanasaheb Peshwa, for the next 20 years, you find that the Maratha kingdom, like the famous adage from Attak to Katak and from the Kumaon to the Kaveri, you find the Maratha kingdom occupies everything in the next 20 years, and they undertake to defend the Mughal emperor who was once there, who was by now a puppet. And it was this undertaking, in exchange for the Subas of Agra, Ajmer and so on, that you find that the Battle of Panipat, when Ahmad Shah Abdali comes from Kabul, there is no reason, earthly reason why a power based in Pune should go to Panipat to fight an invader from Afghanistan. And at that time they fought in solitary, nobody came to assist them. All the North Indian princes, right from Awadh to the Rohillas, they sided with the invader, and the Rajputs stayed aloof, the Jats did not join them, and it was only the Marathas who fought. And in spite of that, they came within an inch of winning that battle. But that setback was recovered in the next 11 years of Madhav rule. In 1772 when he died, Delhi was again in Maratha hands, and most of the south was again captured by them. Hyder Ali had been put in his place, and the Nizam had become a kind of a subsidiary to the Marathas. So he had achieved all those aims. His premature death, like Richard Temple says that his premature death was more fatal than the Battle of Panipat. So at the age of 27 and a half, when you find Madhav dying, and then this crisis comes. That Narayan Rao, 17 years of age, the ever ambitious uncle Raghoba Dada breathing down his neck, that is the stage which was set for the assassination, which occurred 9 months into Narayan Rao's rule. And there are several causes. The plot moves through stages. First, it's a caste war, which I have described here.
Which we will come to in just a bit.
So I just want to show a short slideshow.
Yeah, just can we have the slideshow, please?
It is a scene from a 1930s movie which shows very graphically shows what happened when the Gardis are the Gardes, or the men who were gunners in the Maratha army, entered the Peshwa's palace, and what transpired after that.
We have to also explain that a lot of the Gardis were Muslim, some were Hindu, and they have a very important role to play in this assassination.
So Raghoba has often been described as a Kali Purush, who has been sent to kind of do damage, and the Maratha historians even today like to address him as Kali Purush, because he really damaged them, their future.
आनंदीबाई साहेबांना सुमन सिंगाच्या हातामध्ये कसला तरी हुकमाचा कागद दिलाय आणि म्हणालं तुकडे तुकडे झालं पाहिजे काय बी करून.
काय झालं? काय गडबड आहे?
काय नाही, गार्दी वाड्यात शिरले आहे, त्यांच्या गर्दीत लागला असेल कोणाला तरी.
गादी नारळाला मारताय?
काय आपल्या हुकमाची अंमलबजावणी करताय?
त्याला मारायचा हुकूम दिला नाही मी.
मी दिला आहे तसा हुकूम. होय तुमच्यासाठी, तुम्हाला राज्याचं धनी करण्यासाठी मी दिला होता हुकूम. नाही तर ते आता ऐकणार नाही.
नाही नाही, मी मोल देणार नाही त्याला. आपल्या श्रीमंतांनी थोडा सरकार खबर राव तुला.
आता याला वाचत असेल तर मला मारा, माझ्यावर तलवार चालवा. तुमचा हुकूम दिला, आता माघार घेता. अचानक राज्य जाईल, सगळ्यांची डोकी मारली जातील. माझा ऐका, टाका तलवार.
So Raghoba is actually, according to the movie's version, his wife Anandibai is the architect behind the entire plot. And when he rushes forward to save his nephew, he just wants to capture him. He doesn't want to kill him. That's what the story says. And of course, there are various narratives which I have taken up in the book. This is one which has been taken in the movie. And this picture is drawn by a very famous artist called Rao Bahadur Dhurandhar. The original picture is no longer available. This is colored using digital means. And
Can you tell us about this, because it is showing Anandibai, and here the role of the women, I mean Narayan Rao's mother, Raghoba's wife, in the whole assassination.
You will find Maratha women in those days as well as today are really very powerful, are really very powerful individuals. So whether it is Chhatrapati Shivaji's mother Jizabai, whether it is Sambhaji's wife Yesubai, whether it is Tarabai who fought with Aurangzeb single-handedly for 7 years, whether later on it is Bajirao's mother Radhabai, who was the main influence in the whole Peshwa, Gopikabai, who was Narayan Rao Peshwa's mother, and Parvati Bai, Sadashirao Bhau's widow, who her husband having died, she said, I will not shave off my hair and I will not wear the robes of a widow, because I don't believe my husband is dead. And she continued to behave like a married woman. So you find a series of very strong women right from the 16th, 17th century in the Maratha annals of the Marathas, and I can vouch for them. Even today they are like that.
So coming back to the assassination itself, to what extent, and when I was reading the book, this struck me, that after the assassination of Narayan Rao, what happened in the next 20-30 years kind of set the tone for the rise of the English, did it not?
Actually, that's subject of my subsequent books. But here what happened is, when Raghoba assumed the rank of the Peshwa, within days of his nephew's assassination, it was not looked upon kindly by the people and several ministers who were at that time. But without some tangible proof that this man is behind this plot, they could do nothing for the next 1 or 2 months. It was Ram Shastri, whose clip this movie is taken from, who was the Chief Justice of the Maratha court, and he found a letter. That letter had the Marathi words Dharave, and which had been converted to Marave. Dharave means to capture or catch, and Marave means to kill. So somebody had made that Dha into Ma. So Dharave became Marave, and till this day there is a phrase in Marathi, Dhacha Ma kela, Dha ka Ma kisne kiya. And that is a mystery which remains unsolved. It was unsolved at that time, it remains unsolved today, because 20 years later you find Anandibai writing a letter to Nana Fadnis. Why did you not investigate who did Dhacha Ma? She asks him. Well, the general belief at that time was that it was Anandibai who had done it. So that was a mystery, and that still remains a mystery. But obviously there were elements within that entire plot, and I would say the plot was in 3 different levels. Started with the Gramanya.
Yeah.
Gramanya was basically right from the 15th, 16th century, every village used to declare that it was a contest between Brahmins and the Prabhus. The Prabhus were Kayasthas at that time, and they were both literate classes. They were both warrior taking part in battles. They both held very important high positions in government, and they were competing with each other. So the Brahmins of a village used to declare that the Prabhus are not Kshatriyas. Now if you remove somebody from being Kshatriya, he straight away goes down to becoming and that was something which socially unacceptable to the Prabhus. So such Gramanyas continued about 6 or 7 times from the 16th century onwards, and every time they were overturned either by an order brought from Kashi or by the Peshwa or by the Chhatrapati, that kind of thing. In Narayan Rao's first 2 months as a 17-year-old boy, somebody from the Konkan area brought out this proposal to him that these people are to be declared as non-Kshatriyas. Now there were 9 rules which are put in the book which they had to follow. Like they could not pray to the Shaligram. They could not say Namaskar when they can cross a Brahmin. They had to say Dandavat. These are all Marathi words. So all the restrictions were put, and they were highly humiliating. And there were very important, powerful people at that time who were at the helm of affairs, like the Vakils of the Nagpurkar Bhosles had come to Pune. So there were many important officers like Sakharam Hari Gupte, who fought at the Moti Talab battle, was Hyder, a very brave commander. He was Prabhu. So these people were very unhappy about it. So the nidus of the plot began around, and there was a counter option available in Raghoba, though he was in prison. There was always an option available because it ran in the family. They could not have found a Peshwa from outside the family and brought him and put him in that chair. If we get rid of Narayan Rao, put him in prison, Raghoba is there, we'll make him the Peshwa. So that is where the plot really started. And somewhere along the line, they finally had to find executors of the plot. That is where the Gardis came in.
So you had the caste angle, and now please talk to us about the religious angle.
So the religious angle was not that much, because mostly it was within the Maratha fold. When Raghoba left Pune to go on and fight with Hyder Ali, because Hyder Ali was making advances while all these things were going on, and he decided to go, and first he attacked the Nizam, and then he was proceeding down south towards Hyder's territories to take back, because places like Chitradurga and all, Hyder had come there, he was taking money from them, and these were supposedly under the protection of the Marathas. Chitradurg, Savnur's Nawab and all, so they were threatened by Hyder Ali's invasions. So as he was coming down in Pune, there was a coup, and you find that Raghoba learns when he is 400 miles from Pune that there is a group coming up there which was composed of 12 ministers, and these 12 ministers later on came to be called the Bar Bhai, and they were led by two of the senior most people. One was Nana Fadnis, one was Sakharam Bapu. And then these people mobilized an army to prevent Raghova from coming back to Pune and trying to capture him. And that is when the second part of the book starts, and what Raghova does.
Raghoba, of course, also goes on the run and manages to evade capture for quite some time.
So basically Raghoba has been given a kind of a title called Ragho Bharari. Bharari in Marathi means one who moves very fast. So he fought a battle at Kasegaon where an important Maratha commander lost his life. And then when all the Maratha armies became converging on him, he ran so fast from there that earned him that epithet of Ragho Bharari. And before you knew it, he was on the Tapi, he crossed the Tapi, went to Burhanpur, he went to Indore, and he sat with Holkar and Scindia. And they became the mediators between the ministerial party, and that 6, 7, 8 months went in that. In the meanwhile, he got a chance to negotiate with the English at Surat.
So that's precisely what I'm talking about, that Raghoba being on the run and being cornered, he opened up negotiations with what is going to be, what the power that is going to bring an end to Marathas in a way.
It was a very long way off at that point in time, 50 years more. And the first Anglo-Maratha war, you find it was in 3 phases. So the next phases will come in the next book. But in phase 2, at the battle near Pune at Talegaon, the English were decisively beaten. And they had to sign a very humiliating convention called the Vadagaon Convention, which Warren Hastings kind of immediately repudiated. This is not acceptable to us, it was not done with our... And the battle starts again. And that is the time which will come in the next book, that the Marathas, the Nizam and Hyder Ali, they come together, form a triple alliance to evict the English from this country.
So I'm going to ask you now about, because in a way this is also a biography, it's a biography of an anti-hero. What were you thinking when you were writing this book? Because Raghoba in many ways is a very nuanced character. You know, on the one hand he's very brave, he's a good general, he's got all of those Maratha characteristics that mark them out on the battlefield, but at the end of the day he's also very ambitious, very cunning, and he's associated with the only assassination, I think.
He's not cunning, that's the funny part. He's what we call Kaan ka Kacha. And he was brave, agreed. He was very, very superstitious and given to austerities which went on for a very long time, part of the day. And he would look at the muhurat for starting a battle or for reading the letters which have come. And again, he was given to a lot of sensual pleasures which have been described in the book. And so that was the kind of person he was. Now I'll give you an example that before the Battle of Udgir in 1759 at versus the Nizam, there was a cannon called Lakshmi. Now this cannon burst one day, because those cannon balls in the cannon bore used to be different, and very often the cannon used to burst. So he writes a letter saying that somebody had come to see this cannon yesterday, Lakshmi cannon. I don't know what he did to it, but the next day it burst. So the technical know-how that the senior most Maratha commanders had at that time also was of that level and of that kind of level of superstition. So it's very complex. In fact, an English man named James Forbes, he's written a diary which is actually in the British Library in London, got the whole 300-page diary. So 1.5 years that he was with Raghoba, he's written a detailed account of what all transpired, and he writes wonderful pen pictures of Raghoba. And the first sentence he says that it's very difficult to give an account of what kind of a person he is. So even I, instead of reading about Raghoba, I would not completely put him as an evil person. I would not put him as a very brave person. Definitely an ambitious person. He was not capable of cunning because he relied more on his shagirds than on his ministers. He trusted them more. So it's a very complex personality which comes before you when you start reading his letters and you start reading the accounts of the period.
So at this point, I think we can open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much. Is there any chance it's clear which ethnic in Afghanistan?
I didn't get you. Which?
Is there any chance it's clear which ethnic in Afghanistan? For example, when we talk about the Kabul, is related to Zabul and also north of the Baluchistan in Iran. When we talk about the Pashto, it's related to Pakistan. I mean, again in Baluchistan. I just wanted to know.
Actually, Afghanistan as a nation was born, and even today Ahmad Shah Abdali is the father of Afghanistan. So he founded the Kingdom of Afghanistan in 1747. Before that, India and Persia were neighbors. Now, out of that, for a long time, you find Kandahar is with the Afghans, while Kabul is with the Mughal Empire. Then they lose Kabul, and then that becomes... So, though the province of Kabul includes Peshawar, you find that Afghanistan actually went beyond the Hindu Kush mountains. So this part of the Kabul province, which includes Peshawar, came into what is now Pakistan, and beyond the mountains is what became Afghanistan. But that so many tribes were there. I mean, I won't be able to tell you the...
So I had read somewhere that Ram Shastri Prabhu ne actually identified who does this Dahcha Ma, as we call in Marathi.
He actually blames Raghoba for it. And he comes to the court. You know, there is a 13-day mourning period, which I have described in the book after anybody dies. So he comes in just a clean dhoti with no clothes. And he says, I refuse to do namaskar to you, because in that mourning period you are not supposed to do namaskar. So he says that I have just brought a vessel of water with a pari in it, with a spoon in it, and I am leaving this job and going. So the people ask him, what is the penance for this crime which has been committed by Raghoba? So he says, penance, you first sit in a hut of dry grass and set it on fire, or you drink hot boiling lead. If you survive from that, then you can be punished with death. So he says that, and he goes back to his native village, and he doesn't come back until Raghoba has been removed from the Peshwa's post and somebody else come there. So he had a letter which he found, because Grand Duff also mentions that a letter was there which Ram Shastri founded. That letter today is not traceable. 250 years have gone in between. The entire British period has gone in between. So that letter is not traceable. So Ram Shastri didn't hold a court as such. He went to a village where Raghoba was at that time, 1.5 months later, and he declared the punishment to him over there. That's what the story says. One place they say he did it the next day. So there's no original letter. We have to rely on Bakars. Bakars are subjective accounts basically.
The Bajirao and Madhavrao Peshwa, both were they poisoned actually, because both of them died with some mysterious diseases?
No. Bajirao died of heat stroke in the month of April on the banks of the Yamuna. He was sick for 7 days with fever. And Madhavrao died of a very obvious consumptive illness, which was probably tuberculosis. 3 members of the Peshwa family at different times died of tuberculosis. Chimaji Appa, 1740, Nana Sahib, 1761, and Madhavrao, 1772.
We can maybe take a very quick question.
We take 1 minute to tell the question.
Okay. Thank you so much, Udayji. It was absolute pleasure talking to you, and do go and check out the book. It's available here. It's a fascinating read.
And thanks for Alo for inviting me here, and had a wonderful time in Pondicherry. Thank you.